In today's video, I will be covering every legendary weapon in Deepwoken, the lore surrounding them, their obtainment methods, and the best builds that you can make with them, which are unsurprisingly pretty similar. If you enjoy, make sure to subscribe, since only about 20% of the people watching this video right now are actually subscribed. Now let's get into it. Starting with the Curved Blade of Winds, the most iconic and most commonly used legendary weapon in the game, as well as being one of the first ones added. The Curved Blade, first of all, comes with two passive abilities: Aftercut, which basically just adds 5% extra damage, and if you inhale a mantra, doubles up to 10% extra damage on an M1. The second passive is that your critical attacks apply Suffocate, making people unable to cast mantras for a limited time. The weapon has two stances, which is the only weapon in the game that changes drastically based on your stance that isn't this. The one-handed version has 0.78 swing speed, and the crit changes into a move which propels you forward, applying Suffocate on hit, with the two-handed stance having the swing speed at 0.8, which is slightly faster, and the critical is now a ranged attack, which basically does the same thing without moving your body. The Curved Blade of Winds in lore was forged in the Cataclysm and survived the tides, treasured and stored until it is found by the player. The Curved Blade of Winds was forged by the first Gale Breathers and has remained in the world ever since. The best type of builds for the Curved Blade are either going to be Trackstar gank builds with Jet Striker or some other oath, or if you want a Chime of Conflict build, just the generic one, 55 Charisma, 40 Fortitude, 40 Strength, Shrine of Order into max Gale and Agility, and then max out your weapon stats like Gale and Medium. Little fun fact, but the Curved Blade of Winds is hated by Kumo Hoa. I don't know who he is either, I just know he hates the Curved Blade. Also, it is obtainable in Depth's chest, the Scion of Etheron boss chest, the Duke boss chest, and the Maestro Evangard boss chest. Next up is the recently nerfed, and I mean very much nerfed, Light's Final Toll, a willpower light weapon which was once only scaled based off of willpower, making my build now obsolete. 0.85 swing speed and 5% base penetration. The critical for this weapon is a bit complicated. Basically, as you keep using it and landing it, it progresses through stages, and the final stage is unblockable and unparryable and needs to be dodged or vented in order to avoid it if you're within its hitbox. The Light's Final Toll was created by a Gremmer to honor those who died in the drownings of the tides. The weapon itself is implied to drain the sanity of those who use it, tearing their connection to the afterlife and draining their soul of its energy. It was casted out to sea, never to be seen again until it sunk into the depths, until Chime players eventually got their hands on it. The best build you can make with the Light's Final Toll is a Gale Breath Curved Blade of Winds build, because this weapon recently went from being like top 3 to bottom 5 viable weapons in the game, so maybe just don't use it. It is, however, obtainable from Layer 2 chests and the Diluvian mechanism if you ever want to use it for some reason. The Railblade, created by the Ignition Union with its light and heat being able to keep off the snow-like parasites of Layer 2's Eternal Gale. This weapon was created for the Ignition Union Deep Delvers, and it uses steam to create fire rather than magic through an entombment imbued into the weapon. The Railblade has 0.68 swing speed and 22 base damage and scales off of heavy, and is often used with Flame Charm. Honestly, the Railblade isn't amazing, especially for PvP, since heavy's been out of the meta for a long time. The only real viability for the Railblade is for PvE, and even then it's not the best PvE weapon, so only use it if you like it. It is, however, obtainable from Layer 2 floors 1 and 2 through chests from the bosses and drop chests in floor 1 or in Hell mode. The Flareblood Kamas were created by the black diver known as the Chaser as an experiment, and it is exclusively dropped by his boss fight. The Flareblood Kamas are a dagger type weapon with 30% penetration and 0.98 swing speed. It is only obtainable by the Chaser, and this weapon is just kind of fine. It scales off mostly light, but has 2 scaling and intelligence, and it's meant to be an intelligence-based weapon. The main appeal is the crit, which is a ranged move that can be aimed with your mouse to make some sort of weird-looking blood geyser. The weapon overall is just kind of mid. If you want to use it, then people generally advise going Silent Heart, because then you could get max scaling with 100 intelligence and 100 light. So not having to worry about mantras or attunement stats is good for you. The weapon also drops opponent's blood bar, which isn't bleed damage like some people think it is. It just drains the bar in the bottom left that is associated with your blood. Which, by the way, the blood bar is kind of useless, because when have you ever seen someone die to that bar going all the way down? The Ignition Deep Crusher has no lore or even a weapon description in the game. Anyway, the weapon's gimmick is that it can swap between a club and a sword type by changing the damage from blunt to slash if you change stances. Yes, I said sword. What are you gonna do about it? The weapon has a 0.79 swing speed and 15% base penetration. The critical move is an AoE around you and it causes a mini metal earthquake. Honestly, this weapon is just kinda mid. It's good for the average Chime build, but with Iron Sing instead. The same boring 55 charisma Shrine of Order into max weapon stats for the scaling. It is obtainable via any chest in the depths layers 1 or 2. The Grand Sudaruska, which traps the soul of Sudaruska the Unbroken as she died killing ministry agents to her last breath before she imbued this axe with her soul, turning her into the Grand Sudaruska. The Grand Sudaruska is a sentient heavy ice weapon with 8 frost thrust scaling and 8 heavy scaling, with 0.62 swing speed. The weapon has a unique passive of making it rain frost bolts from the sky every third connecting hit. The critical is actually worse now that they gave it a unique crit, as the old axe downwards chop is actually way better. The weapon's heavy, so obviously it only works in PvE builds and isn't meta for PvP. It could be obtained from the Crypt of the Unbroken, Scion of Etheron boss chest, Chaser boss chest, and specifically Layer 2 Ministry ambush chests. Next is the Storm's Eye. On to the next weapon. The Crypt Blade was forged from the souls of people during the Cataclysm to spare them from the wretched torment and literal hell and suffering, which was the drownings of the tide. The Crypt Blade is the Shadow Legendary with 0.64 swing speed and 0.15 second end lag, which is one of the slowest in the game. Shadowcast passive talents will also apply on hit with the Crypt Blade, and this is the only heavy weapon super actively used for PvP exclusively. And the only reason I could think for this is because it doesn't work well for PvE because it's elemental, and most mobs have elemental resistances past a certain level. The recommended build for this is the same boring Shrine of Order Chime build, which is recommended for every person playing in the Chime of Conflict. You basically just go 55 charisma, 40 strength, 40 agility or fortitude, usually fortitude, and then you Shrine of Order down and then go into your max weapon stats. It's the same build every time. This game is not unique. This is not a build creation game anymore. This is a meta following game. You're gonna follow the meta if you want to win in the Chime of Conflict. Anyway, on to the Purple Cloud, which is obtained through the Maestro Evangard boss fight, and it is a blade which holds a powerful grand soul of its own, with 0.8 swing speed and 15% penetration, and it has been horribly nerfed. It's just kinda mid now, there's not really much to say. This was definitely the best weapon when it came out, but then again, it was only the best weapon for like an hour before it got nerfed, or however long it took. There really isn't a lot of lore on this weapon. The other two weapons were definitely fleshed out way more than this one, as we don't even know how Maestro Evangard got this weapon like the other two. We also don't know why it's not a good idea to draw it out for too long. It's probably like the Mortal Blade or something in Sekiro, where if you hold it out for too long, you die. But we really don't know, and hopefully they'll add a quest, which would be really cool, to awaken the weapon so you could draw it. I doubt they would, but it would be really cool if they allowed you to awaken the weapon in the future with like a special quest where you kill the 4th Prophet, the Lord Regent, or something, and then you're able to draw the weapon as you, I don't know, trap his soul in it or something. I just think that would be really cool. Anyway, on to the Pale Briar, which is obtained by Maestro Evangard after an incursion with the 100th Legionnaires against the Ministry. It is a heavy weapon with 0.61 swing speed, 25 penetration, and 10% chip damage. So far its stats are pretty good, but it's a heavy weapon, so it's really only good for PvE. The unique AoE ranged moving critical is very unique, and as a whole, this weapon is honestly great for PvE, and I would actually place it within the top 5 PvE weapons in the game right now, because it does a lot of damage, it has an AoE crit, meaning you can kill multiple mobs at once, and overall it's just a great weapon despite being heavy. The Cerulean Thread, obtained by the Maestro Evangard when he murdered a student of the Ministry's 4th Prophet, aka the Lord Regent. This student under the 4th Prophet was pretending to be a Vigil's guard when the Maestro Evangard pretended to challenge him as a drill, where he then proceeded to just kill him because he saw it through the disguise. The Cerulean Thread is a contender for the best dagger in the game with 0.98 swing speed and 15 damage, which means it has way more swing speed than the Tonto with only 0.5 damage less, with the Cerulean Thread's main downside being the 40 millisecond end lag delay at the end of its combos, which sounds like a lot, but it really isn't. It's about a fourth of the end lag of the crit blade, and it's really rarely going to get you punished. Next is the Kearsiger, which is a heavy weapon dropped only by the Scion of Etheron, with 0.62 swing speed and 5 penetration. The weapon is Kearsian in origin, although the Kearsguards are of course now controlled by Etheron when they made this. The weapon's critical is literally a rail blade laser, and this weapon scales off charisma for some reason. I guess they just wanted to give a legendary for every stat without any sort of relevance to it. The weapon itself is actually more tied to Etheron than the Kearsguards because it was made after Etheron had already taken control of New Kearsa, which we know by talking to the Fallen Lightborn who was captured, which that interaction, because he remembers you through layer 2 loops, because if you didn't know, layer 2 is kind of all in like a weird time loop, which is why you can keep killing Kate Chaser and Etheron. But because of that, we actually know that Lightborns are probably canonically immune to weird time loop mind erasure things. So that guy is in actual hell just living down there for hundreds of thousands of years unable to die. And finally, the Imperial Staff. This weapon is belonging to the Legion Praetorian and is legendary in its origin story, said to be capable of wiping cities and towns off the map in single swings as it extends to the length of the world. First of all, this means Deepwoken's world could be flat. Second of all, it is obtainable through Maestro Evangard's boss chest and the Primadon. It has a 0.75 swing speed as a medium weapon and 10% penetration stat. The critical also has 3 stages like the Light's Final Toll, and the staff extends for the crit, giving it massive amounts of range in its 3rd stage. This weapon scales off 5 in medium and 3 in the strength stat, and overall it's a very solid weapon that I would actually really recommend using because the range itself makes it better than rifles after the recent nerf. So if you were originally a rifle player and you're sad that they removed the projectiles, you could actually just start using the Imperial Staff because the crit has enough range to basically make it act the same with just a little bit more end lag and slowdown. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. That was every legendary weapon in Deepwoken, their origins, their stats that matter except for the base damage. Yeah, I didn't cover base damage, but it's not like any of you care about that anyway, because whenever a weapon's base damage gets nerfed by 0.5, people thinks it gets gutted, which, no, you guys don't know how nerfs work. Funnily enough, the Light's Final Toll actually was gutted. Adding a completely new scaling to it was a crazy nerf that is going to make it way worse, because now my build, which has 100 willpower, is garbage because I didn't put points into Light. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Maybe you learned something from this video. Maybe you just enjoyed listening to me talk about weapons. I won't be streaming today because I'm busy, and I'll probably come back with the streams on Monday. I love you all. Have a great day. And goodbye.